So now I want to shift gears and finish up the lecture by talking about the theory of island biogeography and to start to get into sort of species area relationships. Okay, so up until now, we've considered metapopulations, largely considering just the fraction of occupied patches. But now we want to shift gears away from just single species populations to actually considering species richness, right? That measure of diversity, so community level stuff. I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen so I can work through the notes with you. And so that's essentially what the theory of island biogeography is trying to do. It's attempting to explain what controls the number of species in a given area, largely considering islands, though some of the same theory can be applied to other systems that aren't islands, but it was originally conceptualized and developed for islands. All right. Okay. And we can sketch it out in this plotting space. Actually, let's make it smaller. Move all circle thingies up. All right. Where on the y-axis we have the rate. Where rate corresponds to either immigration or extinction. And then on the y-axis, we actually have the number of species or species richness, which we remember from a previous lecture is also called alpha diversity. And this is what we're trying to explain, right? This is what we're trying to get at is if we have an unsampled island that we go out to, we want to be able to estimate, given the proximity to other islands, how many species should be there. So it's kind of cool in that this is entirely like sort of neutral. It doesn't assume anything about the habitat in the island. If it has like a big volcano, if it's haunted, things like that. It's just all that it cares about is immigration and extinction. Or okay. And so we're attempting to explain this thing on the x-axis, and we can start. I wish I could draw cool curved lines. Maybe I can. Oh no. How come it didn't curve? I don't know what I'm doing. There, I was able to do it. All right. Ha! They said it couldn't be done. All right. So let's consider that the extinction rate. This is the extinction rate as related to species richness. We can draw a couple of these lines. Can I move that? There we go. All right, with different properties. And so this is, so this is our extinction rate. And how these extinction rates differ with species richness is based on the area of the island. So we would assume that small islands have a higher extinction rate. Okay, so this is already harkening back to ideas of metapopulations, where everything is controlled by extinction and colonization. And so here I'll put associated with, oh, come on. So that relationship between extinction rate and species richness is for small islands. This relationship is flatter for big islands. So now we have small island, we have big island. So that is the island area effect. We also can consider the influence of colonization. And I'll change color. Maybe I'll go with green. And so, yeah. So this presupposes that nearby islands, so things that are really close, have a higher rate of colonization. So this distance effect, I did pick the wrong one. All right, and we'll change that to green if we can. Mess that up. And then you can't see that, can you? Change it to white. That's actually can see. All right, and so now this is immigration rate or colonization rate. Consider immigration rate. That's how it's traditionally thought of. And we can draw maybe 2 or 3 of those, maybe 2 because 3 seems too difficult for me to figure out how to do. Okay, with the top one, you have the highest immigration rate when species, sorry, not when species, when you have a nearby island. So it's close to the source or close to other populations. So you have near and far. And it's the balance between these two things that enables you to predict equilibrium species richness, right? So we have these ideas about how these rates should relate to species richness. And these intersections represent equilibrium points, right? So if you followed this down to the actual point on the, so from here down, you'd have that species richness predicted, that value of species richness, given the balance between extinction rate and colonization rate. Sorry, extinction rate and immigration rate. I kept saying colonization. I'm sorry, it's typically considered to be immigration. And so this is that like classic idea. It's the balance between extinction rate and immigration rate that determine equilibrial species richness on an island. Okay, so now we've extended sort of metapopulation into a more community level measure. Yeah, this also makes a bunch of assumptions and is it's mainly used as a teaching tool now. It's less applied to actual things because it presupposes a lot of things about the influence of island area on extinction and immigration rates. It is still useful, but yeah, it assumes that all islands are reachable, for instance, by every species in the community. And it doesn't really consider the actual spatial structure of the patches and islands. And so it is of limited empirical utility, but it is a cool sort of piece of conceptual theory. Okay. And the last thing I'll talk about is related to this idea, specifically island size, and that's species area relationships. Okay, so I was looking at my notes to make sure I covered what I wanted to cover theory of island biology. Okay, so the species area relationship basically just says that the, maybe I'll draw another, I'll take another figure. Make it orange. That the larger the island area, the more species it has. which is related to some concepts from island biogeography theory. Species richness, island area. And so that's our y-axis, and we would expect that this is just a positive relationship. And it's actually not even, it's not linear. It's it forms in a power law. And so let's just draw it as a very ugly curve. What am I doing? I shouldn't be allowed to. That looks like a power law, right? I'm just kidding. It's not saturating. Why does it keep wet? That's just going to be it. It's not that relationship, but you know, whatever. Here's the actual relationship that's predicted for the, and this is an island species area relationship. I'll go over the difference between an island species area relationship and a mainland species area relationship. Okay. A lot of times these are considered in log-log space, in which case it would be linear in log-log space. But regardless. So this is an island species area relationship where the number of species S is determined by some constant C times the island area raised to the power Z. And so these two parameters, C and Z, are the things that need to be estimated from given data. So Z describes the shape of the relationship in terms of how this sort of advancing the slope is or how nonlinear it is. And then C is some constant, where C actually does mean something. It describes the species we would expect to find in one unit of sampling area A. Whatever unit that is in, as I point out there. So there's a lot of utility in this relationship. One, it's like a very simple sort of intuitive thing that doesn't consider anything about like sort of dispersal or spatial positioning of the island. It just says, yeah, your island is this big, then you have this many species, given this fitted relationship and what we know about species. So it doesn't consider like competition or anything like fun like that. And so this is the island species area relationship. There's also the mainland species area relationship, which I will do my best to draw. And so that it takes I'm going to make it green like land. It takes a contiguous piece of area where so the communities or species are coexisting in this space. And all right, get this set up. All right, and so it says that if I were to drop this randomly and subsample, and then do that a bunch of times, that I could build up. The larger my sampling square was, the more species that I would sample, right? That's what this sort of presupposes or says. So let's say I have all of these that I would randomly sample in this contiguous habitat. I'll make this one really big. All right. And I made an art. It basically shows this same relationship, except now instead of island area, it's just like sampled area. All right. And this doesn't have to, so this could be randomly sampled like this, or it could also be nested subsets. What I mean by nested subsets is I sample this large overall area, and then I sample this slightly smaller area, then I sample this slightly smaller area, and then I sample that slightly smaller area. Either way, I think both would be considered mainland species area relationships. And the same relationship applies, the same sort of power law scaling between species number and the area of a sampled area, either island area or sampled area in a contiguous habitat. All right. And yeah, and so both of these are an extension of metapopulation theory to the community level, and are both interesting bits of conceptual theory with obvious conservation and management implications, especially that sort of species area relationship, which we can talk more about in class, but I think I might be getting upwards in terms of how long this video is. Yeah, and I go over in the notes like sort of the utility of this. You can estimate the species richness for a completely unobserved or unknown area. It can help in guiding sampling decisions when you're trying to sort of estimate the number of species in a given area. Yeah, and it's really interesting that, so this is such an abstraction away, right? So I'm not considering any information about the species themselves, right? So their variation and dispersal rates are not considered. Variation in survival, competition, species type even. It is something that is, I take data and I fit the model to it, and then it tells me something about my system. And allows me to sort of forecast into new sites or new areas. All right, so hopefully that made sense. We'll stop the video and stop sharing here. Nice. And I will see you next time.